Thank you for joining us today. We are joined by Citrix, and we will be discussing NetScaler App Firewall. So today we will cover the top threats currently, and then Manny from Citrix is going to join us and discuss the benefits of NetScaler security, as well as document sharing and document protection against ransomware, and then we will open it up to a Q&A. If you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and enter them in the questions box, and we will cover them at the end of the presentation. So just a little bit about WAMS. We've been serving law firms and small businesses since '74. We've always focused on the legal industry. And our team is comprised of systems analysts with various certifications, all using their unique expertise to keep you productive, compliant, and most importantly, secure. We work with industry leaders such as Citrix to provide your business with optimal solutions. So a little bit about the threat environment today. We know that we are hearing about ransomware attacks left and right. There is always a new strain developing. A few of the most prevalent. First is Globe Imposter. It was named the second most prevalent malware of August 2017 and impacted 6% of organizations worldwide. Y-hole, as people are calling it, the latest from the Locky family, has also been prevalent. We know that Locky hit the scene right around March 2016. Roughed Head is another one you may not have heard of, but it involves large-scale malvertising used to deliver various malicious websites, scams, adware, exploit kits, and ransomware. Zeus, Ramnet, and TrickBot have been the top banking Trojans, and banking Trojans steal passwords, banking credentials, and other data. We hear about data breaches all the time. The largest, most recently, was the Equifax data breach, affecting 143 million consumers and putting them at risk. All of these small Word doc vulnerabilities sometimes are not able to be patched before the first couple hit, unfortunately. And we have been hearing a lot about CCleaner and that issue being compromised as well. We had a few that were on the version that was affected. Unfortunately, we were able to take care of that really quickly, and none of our clients were hurt or affected, but we know that was not the case for everyone. So we're running some web attacks per month. Now we can see that it is falling steadily through 2016, but despite this general drop in web threat activity, it is still a major threat. I believe Symantec blocked an average of more than 229,000 unique web attacks on endpoint computers every day so far for 2016. And in the second chart here, we see that website vulnerabilities have fluctuated, but it is consistent that more than 3/4 of sites were found to have vulnerabilities. So I'm going to turn it over to Manny. Manny is the lead systems engineer with Citrix. He has been with Citrix for over 10 years and has over 25 years of experience in IT. And word on the street is that he is a security rock star. So he's going to tell you all about NetScaler. Manny?
Thank you, Ashley. All right, and thank you to everybody for attending. My name is Manny Benitez. I am currently a lead systems engineer on the America's Citrix service provider team. That means that I help the Citrix service provider staff help our partners deliver NetScaler and SD-WAN solutions in their environments. I have been at Citrix a little over 10 years. Most of that time was spent in Citrix IT, architecting and delivering solutions with NetScaler and SD-WAN. But again, more recently, I've joined the CSP team, and very happy here to be supporting Jack and Ashley with this presentation and in general. I have spent approximately 25 years in IT. Sounds like a really long time when I put it that way, but the short of it is that, you know, over 25 years I've seen a lot of things change. I'm sure you all have as well. Just in the last 10 years, it seems that there's been monumental changes in the industry. And certainly, you know, the threats in terms of security, in terms of IT security, in terms of data security, have sort of just escalated and escalated almost exponentially from year to year. I don't, I think my friends that are security rock stars would laugh at somebody calling me a security rock star. I have spent time specifically in the security field as part of my 25 years in IT. And I'm going to be very happy to talk a little bit about security today. Okay, so let's start with NetScaler. Those of you that know NetScaler know that it is what we call the security Swiss Army knife, right? There's a ton of things that the NetScaler can do. I mean, when we say availability, we mean load balancing in a data center, load balancing across data centers. We do application acceleration and performance, application performance. We provide general availability for applications and not just Citrix environments, but applications in general. And of course, we do security, right? Security is built into the NetScaler. It's part of what we do day in and day out with the NetScaler. And so today we're going to be talking specifically about App Firewall. But I just want you to note that there are various things that the NetScaler can do outside of App Firewall to help protect resources and websites, servers, and services. So App Firewall is the one that we're going to be talking about specifically today, but the NetScaler itself can also provide DDoS protection, SSL proxy unified gateway, which is a secure gateway into your environment, a DNS proxy to help secure your DNS resources, and of course AAA proxy for secure authentication and authorization. And so that's why we say the NetScaler is really a security appliance. App Firewall, of course, is very important for those public-facing applications. But aside from that, we can help protect a whole multitude of other services that you need to provide, including SSL, DNS, and of course, provide DDoS protection. So Web Application Firewall, we're talking about it here today, and as Ashley touched on, just this year alone, there have been a multitude of breaches. CCleaner one was particularly disturbing just because it was the software that you were sort of relying on to protect you against threats, and instead it contained a vulnerability or contained a Trojan. So that one was particularly disturbing. But of course, we also have the Equifax hack, which means that now literally millions of customers' information is now out there on the web and potentially in the hands of some bad actors. Something we never want to hear about, but unfortunately this is the landscape today. This is what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And the truth is that we're probably not going to see things get much better over time. They will probably, as companies address this internally and companies such as Microsoft and Apple address this externally, we are going to see more and more focus on security, and so those threats and attack vectors may be less and less over time, but we are still going to be talking about attacks in the millions, and we're certainly going to continue to hear about significant breaches, unfortunately, over the next few years. North America and EMEA, we get about half of the attacks. Well, this is an old graphic from 2015, but we do get about half of the attacks just in those two continents. And we, North America and EMEA, also make up the majority of the worldwide security spend. Again, these numbers are probably old. I would imagine that these are probably larger at this point. But the key takeaway here is the cost to business each year. We spend billions, hundreds of billions of dollars each year trying to protect our sites, but it costs us hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars due to these attacks. And these attacks, I mean, it can be loss of intellectual property, but it's also the loss of productivity. Imagine if Amazon was down for a day, how much do you think they would lose in revenue? So when we think of loss of or the cost to the business, it's not just how much it costs you to fix things. It's also loss of revenue during that time that you're trying to address things, loss of productivity for those employees that could be doing other things, your IT and security employees that could be doing other things, that are instead reacting to a security breach. So the reason that we're talking about a NetScaler app firewall is that with NetScaler app firewall, we can help protect and block the vast majority of web application security threats. And we are talking specifically about web application security. We're not talking about network security or encryption. We're talking specifically about protecting those web applications that you have to expose to the internet, either because you're running an e-commerce site, or because you have a customer or patient portal, or just your presence, your company presence on the internet, your company webpage on the internet. These have to be publicly exposed, obviously, so that your customers, potential customers, and partners can communicate with you, can interact with you. And in today's day and age, it's not a matter of if you're making money on the internet, it's how are you making money on the internet, or how are you servicing your customers and partners on the internet. So, in today's day, we used to talk about, well, do you use the internet to generate revenue, or do you use the internet to help service customers and partners? It's not a matter of if anymore, it's a matter of how. How are you doing that? How are you using the internet to do that? So it's very important that those web-facing portals and applications be protected. Because again, as we list just a few here: distributed denial of service, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and SSL attacks. That's just a handful of the application layer attacks that are available out there to bad actors. And they're very willing to try and use these, because it's no longer just the kids in the neighborhood that are doing this to sort of prove a point or to get bragging rights. Now we have organized crime getting involved, and they are in it for money. And so they're putting in a lot of resources, a lot of time, and they're increasingly more sophisticated in the ways that they attack these sites. A big mistake, I think, that a lot of our customers and partners make is thinking that they're too small to be targets of these bad actors. There's no company that is too small to be a target of a bad actor. Obviously, Equifax is a big company, but there have been literally millions of attacks reported every year that are just not of the scale of Equifax, right? And so these are companies that are not at that scale, that are a lot smaller, that are also being penetrated. And so we can help with Web App Firewall. We can provide a Web Application Firewall, again, to protect specifically against those web application threats. But we can also help you with compliance, right? So the Web Application Firewall helps check off a lot of those compliance checkboxes that you need, especially if you're doing PCI, but also if you're doing financial or healthcare vertical type compliance, right? If you have HIPAA, NetScaler Web App Firewall would be something that would help you, again, meet those checkboxes for your compliance requirements. I think it's important to note that NSS Labs, an independent third-party company, recognized Citrix Web App Firewall as the price performance leader, meaning that for the price of the Web App Firewall, we have the best performance. And this is really important to note, because there were some bigger players in that space as well that did not perform as well as Citrix NetScaler. This report is available publicly online. If you go to NSS Labs website, you can see it and download it there. And it's just, I think it's nice to be recognized in that way. Certainly, blocking 99.77% of web attacks is not perfect, but it's certainly better than blocking 0% of those web application threats. And certainly a lot better than some of our competitors that didn't get nearly that high of a score. So I think it's important to note that, and it was certainly appreciated by our team to be recognized by NSS Labs. And lastly, we can team up the Web App Firewall with NetScaler Management and Security, Management Analytics System. That's NMAS. And when we team up the App Firewall with NetScaler Management and Analytics System, we get really deep full visibility into the threat environment as well as into the applications with threat indexes and safety indexes. Those are essentially two sides of the same coin. The threat index is essentially what attacks are we seeing against our specific sites. The safety index is what are we doing to protect those sites, right? So it's a list of the things that we have enabled and that we are doing to protect those specific sites. So we can sort of see, number one, how are bad actors trying to attack these sites, and then on the flip side of that, what are we doing to secure those sites to make sure that they're not compromised. And also you can use that to set corrective steps. For example, if you see that there's a new an indication that there's a high level of a new attack coming in, then that would be something that you could take as an action item in order to make sure that you're protecting against that. And so, why Web App Firewall? Well, I get this a lot from customers and partners. We already have a firewall. We have, and I'm not going to name any names, but we have a network firewall, and we already have a firewall. So why would we need another firewall? Does this replace our existing network firewall? The answer is it does not replace the existing network firewall. But what you're seeing here is that you have a network firewall, and that protects very well up to layer 4. Right, we can do port and protocol protection at that point. But again, these websites that we're talking about, they have to be exposed, right? They have to be exposed on those ports and protocols. And so we have to allow internet users to access these applications and services on those ports. And even if it's SSL, even if it's 443 TCP, that user is going to connect to that site, and they are going to be able to do cross-site scripting and SQL injection, et cetera, attacks, because those don't happen at layer 4 or below. Those happen at layer 7. Those happen up at that application layer, and that is where currently, if you have a network firewall, you have no protection. Okay, this statistic again is probably a little out of date, but the vast majority, over 80% of attacks against websites are aimed specifically at the applications, not at the underlying operating system or at the underlying hardware firmware. It's aimed specifically at that application, whether it's a website application, database application. It's aimed specifically at attacking that application. And so this is where the NetScaler Web App Firewall helps augment your security. We're not going to replace your network firewall. We're going to augment your security by adding protection at those upper layers. We're going to be able to intercept and protect against those application layer attacks, that 86 some odd % of application-specific attacks that occur on the web every day. So this is really where the Web Application Firewall fits into your security portfolio. And again, we're talking specifically here about the applications, websites, and services that you have to expose to the internet. The way we do this is kind of unique. So the vast majority of our competitors do this in a single way, which is a negative or signature-based defense. And so we include that, of course. We have our negative posture, which means that we protect against known threats, and we do this via signatures. A lot of our competitors do the same thing. And this is essentially saying, okay, we know that that bad actors would want to come in and do X, Y, or Z, or we know that there's this vulnerability in this application, and so we're going to block this type of behavior explicitly, or we're going to block this, this sort of response explicitly. And this works well for things that we know about. The problem is, every day there are zero-day attacks, right? Every day we're discovering a new vulnerability. Every day we're discovering a new threat to our websites and web apps and web services. And so, how do we protect against that? That's where Citrix's Web App Firewall is a little different. We also have positive protection against application attacks, and the way we do this is essentially by baselining appropriate behavior and then blocking things that are not part of that baseline. Okay, for example, one of the attacks listed here is SQL injection. The way SQL injection works is a bad actor would create an immensely long string for a SQL request, and would essentially paste that in his browser, send that to the server. The server would see this immensely long string. It would have a buffer overflow, and now the server is compromised. So a very simple way to protect against that. We know on our application that we will not see SQL strings longer than 256 characters. So we can say anything over the 256 character limit in the URL is not valid. We're going to block that. And so right away, just by that behavior, just by knowing what the application behavior should be, we can block against things that we don't want people doing. And again, that's an example of the positive security model. Here again, we're just reiterating. So the negative security model, the known attacks, these are signature based. Again, this is very easy to deploy, very easy to get up and running in your environment. This will protect against all known attacks up to that latest update. We're going to check things like URL cookies and as well as the body of the requests for known attack vectors, right? For anything out there that is known. Where the app firewall magic really comes in is against these unknown attacks, this learning behavior, right? And this is where where you do have to invest a little time. You have to get the web app firewall to understand and learn how your application service, web application or web service works. And so typically we run it in learning mode, which means that it is baselining the correct behavior for that application, and it's learning how that application works on a day-to-day basis when it's working correctly. And so what we do is we take that baseline, and then we can use that as our template for appropriate behavior on this website. And anything that doesn't match that, we can then block. And again, this is going to block against any zero-day attacks, because once the web app firewall understands how the application should be working and the things that should be allowed to happen on that website, it's going to block the things that are not part of that template. This is very easy to update. Obviously, you can just turn learning mode back on, run it again for a specific time period, and while that's happening, it will again sort of add to its template of correct behaviors for an application or service. And then once you apply it, again, we'll block anything not part of that baseline. This is really the strongest, best way to block against attacks, because we are going to basically enforce the way that the application should be used. So customer use cases, who and how should be using this, and how should they be using it? Certainly, if you're running an e-commerce website, if you're taking payments, if you're doing anything PCI related, you should be looking at a web app firewall. This is going to be your best protection against the kind of attacks that you're going to see on those types of sites. We're also going to give you enhanced auditing and reporting, again, for your compliance requirements. But you really want those customer-facing sites to not be compromised. Again, if you're making money on these websites, you want to make sure that they continue running and run optimally without any downtime and without having to spend resources to correct any sort of problems on the back end. It's really important to note, and I think I glossed over this a little bit, but the great thing about the web app firewall is that it adds all of these protections with zero changes to your back-end code, right? So zero changes to your e-commerce websites, zero changes to your patient or partner customer portals, zero changes to your existing infrastructure and software. You essentially just put it in front of your infrastructure, just like you would a network firewall, turn it on, have it run through its either through the baseline or just do the signature-based protections, and on day one you're going to have protection on those sites with making zero changes in anything else in your infrastructure. So it's important to note that that ease of introduction to the environment is important to a lot of customers, because they may not have the time to invest in putting in those protections on their websites. Again, if they're making money on these websites, they may have to wait till they have a window to apply the latest patches. So it becomes critical to have that, sort of that guardian at the gate to make sure that only the appropriate behaviors are being allowed into your websites, especially when you're making money on them or servicing customers and or patients. Again, finance, healthcare, and manufacturing verticals. These are highly uh, audited and have strict compliance requirements, these verticals specifically. If you work in any one of these verticals, certainly auditing, reporting, and compliance are probably some of the three key things that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And again, this is where we can help ease the amount of work and needed by your staff in order to meet the compliance, in order to meet the auditing and reporting requirements as well. So again, customer use cases. This is going to help specifically with internet-facing websites, e-commerce sites, sites that you either use to communicate with partners, whether that's exchanging information or exchanging payments, and also portals for your customers and/or patients. Right? If you have a healthcare organization, you have a patient portal. Extremely important to protect that information. Right? HIPAA requirements are very strict in that regard, and you want to make sure that you're doing all you can to protect your patients and your customers' information there. So just to reiterate, NetScaler App Firewall is going to deliver security to your websites and applications. Again, we're talking about internet-facing websites and applications. We're going to be able to protect against almost 100% of your web app threats today, as well as provide even better protection by baselining the correct, appropriate behavior of each one of those applications that you have. And that's important too. It's not a one-size cookie-cutter fits all. You can run this for each site or application that you have, and you can create a baseline for each one of those sites and applications. Okay, so that if you have one that you need to be more permissive because it's just access to, for example, to your company's website where you just have company information, that can be one policy. And then for your customer portal or for your e-commerce site, that can have a more strict policy to ensure that you're protecting those resources as well as possible. And again, NSS Labs rated us best price performance for web app firewalls out there today. So certainly something that we're proud of. And that ends my portion of the presentation. So I'm going to turn it back over to Ashley, and maybe we can take some questions if we don't already have some.
All right, let's take a look here. And are we back to my screen?
Let me make you presenter, sorry.
No worries.
There we go.
All right, we are back to my screen, and it looks like it closed my presentation, so give me just a second.
Mm-hmm.
All right, are we back?
Yep, looks good.
Wonderful. So now we are going to go ahead and open it up to a Q&A period. Let me see here. All right, first question. So who will benefit from this?
So again, this is going to be companies and partners that have public-facing websites. And specifically, I mean, we all have public-facing websites, right? We all have our Citrix.com or our WAMS.com websites. But specifically, if you're doing business on the web, if you're either using it as a portal for your customers, partners, or if you're using it specifically as an e-commerce site, right? So like a place where your customers can come and either purchase directly from you or purchase through one of your partners via your website. This is where it becomes key to protect those resources, because now you're dealing with, with customer information, sometimes with payment information, or if you're running a healthcare vertical, you're dealing with patient information, which again is strictly regulated under HIPAA. Or really any of the compliance-based verticals, right? So that would be financial, it could be legal, certainly manufacturing. If you're dealing in a vertical where you have compliance requirements, this is something that you should be looking at to help protect those resources that you have that are internet facing, that are public facing. Does that answer your question, Ashley, or does that answer the question, Ashley?
Yes, and it basically answers our next question too, which is, does this help my firm to be compliant?
Yeah, so it does, right? So the idea here is not just that we're protecting, but that we're also helping ease those compliance reporting requirements. So you can very quickly produce a report that shows what compliance you have in place. So you don't have to go and create this report and recreate it each time you have an audit or each time that you're required to report. Makes it very easy to just go in there and generate them either manually or on a scheduled basis. So you have these reports on hand, and it's very easy to then turn it over to the appropriate agencies. So yes, it does certainly help with the reporting requirements, as well as with the compliance requirements.
Thank you, Manny. Well, it looks like we do not have any other questions at this time. So really quickly, in closing, we did have a raffle, and Milo Bolden is our winner, so she'll be receiving a Visa gift card. We will be sending that to her. So congrats, Milo. And that is about it. Thank you for joining us. If you have any other questions, oh, you know, it looks like one just came through.
Okay.
So I'm going to address this question really quickly.
Sure.
Manny, the issues I'm having with Citrix without NetScaler is how the client opens the Citrix client. It has a different response to different kinds of browsers. Will that enhance the efficiency of how the Citrix app client, I'm assuming, works? Looks like it got cut off here.
So this is it's an off-topic question. I'll try and address it as best as I can. Just to be clear, the question is not Web App Firewall related. It's more how Citrix interacts with different browsers. And I'm not sure that I understand because I'm looking at the question here. I'm not sure I understand the details. And looks like it's Rita. So maybe, Rita, if you could just send me an email to my email address, I can try and engage with you and hopefully answer your question. Because looks like I may need a little more information in order to get the right answer to you. So if you wouldn't mind, just take down my email address, please, manny.benitez@citrix.com, and shoot me an email, and I'll respond as soon as I get that.
All right, thank you, Rita. Thank you for answering that, Manny, for taking care of that. And so in closing, thank you so much for joining us today. Any general questions, you can go ahead and email Jack at Citrix. Something more like Rita's question, definitely send to Manny. We've got our information up there. And of course, any questions you have for me as well, feel free to email me. Thank you so much for joining us today, Manny.
My pleasure, Ashley. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we will see you all on the next webinar.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Manny. Take care.